Hi guys, it's Blackshear here, and I cannot wait to show you all how I took all of these trips for very little money. So I'm a girl who loves to travel with her entire being, but I definitely don't got it like that. But because of that, I have had to learn how to use my big brains to learn how to travel on a budget. And at this point, I think that I can confidently say that I have been on this learning journey for the entirety of my life. And I get asked all the time, oh my gosh, Faith, teach me your ways. How are you always traveling? What state do you even live in? And my personal favorite, how are you traveling all the time when you don't even have a job? And first off, major side eye, I do make money sometimes, thank you very much. But secondly, I just learned how to work the system so that I can see all the places that I want to see without having a very crazy expensive budget. Today, we are going to get into all of the tips and tricks that I use every time that I plan a trip, which can save you hundreds, if not thousands, on your next vacation. Starting off strong with the travel tip that is probably going to be the most beneficial for you is knowing when exactly you should travel. Every city has its off seasons. It is quite literally impossible for everyone to be going everywhere in mass volumes at the same time. Although social media definitely makes it feel that way sometimes, especially when we see our favorite influencers going to like a new country every other week. And some of the times we didn't even know those countries existed. So what I do when I want to know when the best time to travel to a new city is, I simply just go to Google and search best time to travel to insert city. Then I hop onto my handy dandy travel apps and search to see which dates during that specific month are going to be the cheapest to fly. And to just give you all kind of a live view of exactly how I do this and kind of what you want to look out for, we're gonna do this together. Time to girl boss our way into a very cheap vacation. So say we want to plan a trip to Milan, for example. Let's just ignore all of my funny little Google search history, but clearly I like to travel and I got questions for Google. So we're first just gonna say, when is the best time to travel to Milan? And we're searching. Okay, so it says the best times to visit Milan are April to May or September to October. And then going down just a little bit, it also says that there are fewer crowds as well as better weather. There isn't like a bunch of AC. Clearly, if you're from the States, you are very used to having AC at all times of the year. You have AC whenever you want. AC, no problem. You can have some AC. European cities are not like that. So now that we've got a good range, we're gonna choose the month. We're gonna choose October. So now we're gonna say flights from, I live in Phoenix, so I'm gonna say Phoenix to Milan in October. So now once this little page has popped up, we're gonna go over to flights up here. Obviously it just shows like random dates in October, so we're gonna click on the calendar button and then it's gonna show us all of the flight prices in October and November. So now that we've got this information, I'm actually seeing that the end of October, honestly the end of October through November is really where it's gonna be the cheapest. So maybe I want to do October 30th through November 8th. That gives us a grand total for our flight of $655 round trip. Not too bad a price if I do say so myself. And then this is just a little disclaimer. Most people do have full-time jobs. So if you can only travel during like certain times of the year or you only get so much PTO, definitely take those into account before you just searching into the abyss of willy-nilly, because you definitely want to make sure that you are coming back home to a job after you go on your vacation. Typically when you're finding the best travel deals, it's kind of going to be like random days, and another hack is like usually it's going to be the cheapest to fly midweek, like Tuesday, Wednesday. And then going off of that, we always want to make sure that we know what the weather is going to be like. I would say research the weather before you even start planning your trip. In this phase of your trip planning, this is when you should start thinking about the weather, because you don't want to plan a trip in December. Oh my gosh, the flight is so cheap, and then you get there and it's literally 2 degrees. There are other months that are going to be better for you. If you want to be in warm weather, if you want to be in cold weather, if you want to be there in the fall, spring, you know, just plan accordingly. And then once again, it's just going to be a very quick and simple little Google search. Since we just planned our little trip for end of October, November, I'm gonna just search like what is the weather like in Milan in November? All the things that you need to know about the weather. It gives us both October and November. So in November, the high is going to be 53 degrees Fahrenheit. The low is going to be 43 degrees Fahrenheit. With all this information, now you just got to decide, do I want to be there in those weather conditions or do I want to choose a different month? Alrighty, so moving on to actually securing those good flight deals. So when I'm planning a trip, there's typically 3 places that I like to look for flights. And those places are Expedia, Google Flights, and Southwest. Each of those companies serves a pretty different purpose in my book, so this is how I break it down. So if I know exactly when I want to travel, like the dates and everything, or at least have a pretty good general time frame for when I want to fly, then I'll look at flights on Expedia. If I don't know what dates or even month that I want to travel, and I'm kind of just like playing around with the idea in my head, then I'll go to Google Flights and do the whole procedure that we just did previously. However, if I'm flying nationally and I specifically want to be able to pack like a bunch of clothes and shoes with me, or maybe I just have equipment that I need to take with me for shooting or something, then I'll head over to Southwest because they give you those 2 free bags for every flight, as well as a free personal item and free carry-on, so you're really getting a lot of free items in that deal. And bonus tip, they're often having like 30 to 50% off flights. Usually during the summer they have even more deals, so like $50 one-ways, which they'll tell you about if you subscribe to their emails or just sign up to be a Rapid Rewards member. And when it comes to Southwest, it's always kind of just like looking on Expedia and Southwest, because if I can get a flight with some other airline and it's only $100 but I need 1 or 2 bags, then it's going to be like an extra 30 to 50 bucks per bag. But if the Southwest flight is like $400 or $500, then I'll probably go with the other flight because it's going to be like a lower total. And when you're deciding on an airline to fly with, there are just so many different rewards programs that they're all offering, which will just end up saving you so much money in the long run. For instance, if you get any of the American Airlines credit cards, then you're gonna get 1 or 2 free bags, access to the lounge if you get a credit card with that. When you use the credit cards, you're gonna rack up a whole lot of airline points, which means cheaper or free flights in the future. Another example is when you start booking more on Expedia, then you're gonna get actual cash back, which you can use in the future on bookings. And that's just simply because they literally want you to keep coming back to them because they want your business, baby. And then like I briefly mentioned before, just always keep in mind when you're booking that you're probably gonna want to tack on like an extra 30 to 50 bucks just to account for your bags, unless you're like a carry-on girly, which I am certainly not. But oftentimes they also charge for your carry-on. If you just like keep that number in mind when you're looking at the flights, then you're not going to be surprised in the end, like once you get to that payment page, oh my gosh, this is an extra $100. Yeah girl, because you needed 2 bags. So if you just keep that in mind from the jump, like while you're looking at the flights, then there's going to be no surprises and you're actually like calculating beforehand if you can actually afford this flight. And then lastly, my biggest tip when buying flights for an affordable price is just booking ahead of time. And I know for all my procrastinators out there, that's probably like the most stressful tip to hear, but it is truly the biggest life hack that I can give you is literally just planning ahead of time. I'd say particularly if you're looking to fly out of the country, like if you live in the States and you're trying to go to Paris or something, you could be looking honestly like up to 9 months ahead of time to lock in a good price. But again, take this specific advice with a grain of salt because airlines do have like random deals throughout the year and prices do fluctuate. They don't usually fluctuate down as often as we want them to. They usually fluctuate up and up and up as the months approach. I think like in general, it's definitely safer to book ahead of time so that you're getting those good flight deals, which doesn't always mean like 9 months before. It can even mean 4 to 5 months before. All right, now let's talk about booking your stay. I definitely feel like a lot goes into finding the right place to stay for your specific trip needs, and it kind of is just based off of what exactly you want to be doing while you're in your new city. So just as an example, oftentimes when I'm traveling to like a huge major city like New York or something, then I'm typically going for Fashion Week. I'll just want to stay kind of in that vicinity where all of the events are happening so that I don't have crazy commute times. And cutting down on your commute means you're also cutting down on travel expenses. I feel like especially if you're on a work trip, you definitely don't want to sacrifice your commute just to save a buck if you can still find something else that's like in the vicinity proximity and you're kind of just balancing out the scale, because one, time is money, and two, if you end up having to take a decent amount of Ubers, that's gonna rack up very, very quickly. And if you want an even better reason to stay in a good area, one time I took an Uber from the airport, LaGuardia in New York, into Manhattan, and it literally cost me $100 one way. This was only a couple years ago. Definitely book your area wisely. When it comes to looking for the area that you want to stay in, I would definitely just suggest opening up your preferred maps app. I personally prefer Google Maps, and then saving all the places that you want to go to during your trip. And that way you kind of just get like a general idea of the area that you're going to want to stay in. And then once you have that done, now you're going to go over to your booking platforms and kind of just look at places to stay within that little bubble that you kind of just mapped out. And if you are like me and you're looking for a place to stay on a budget, usually a very tight budget, then you're probably gonna be looking just outside of that little mapped area. Now, there are 3 travel companies that I tend to lean on when I'm trying to book an affordable stay, and they are Expedia once again, Airbnb, and Safara. Expedia is just kind of your all-around useful app when it comes to looking for a stay, because they give you a ton of useful information, like how far this stay is from the nearest airport, how close is the nearest like major attraction, stuff like that. And then they do probably have the largest selection of stays. They have now started to include like independent apartment homes, kind of like Airbnb style. That's also a cool new perk. But my personal favorite feature about Expedia is the book now, pay later. I particularly love this function because I'm a huge planner and I don't always have the money to book this trip right now. But obviously if I know that I'll have that money after saving up in the future, then I can just be like, okay, perfect, I'm gonna book now and then I'll pay for it when I get there. And once again, booking right now is making sure that you're locking in that cheap low price. And another great thing that comes with the book now pay later is free cancellations. When you're utilizing this feature, don't get scared that they are like asking you for payment details. They kind of need something to go off of. They can't just be like, okay, perfect, you're good. But they usually give you a very large window to cancel your stay for free, oftentimes up to just the day before, and you can still cancel it, which I find extremely relieving, because maybe I'm planning a trip with a friend and maybe they back out, or like something crazy happens to where I can no longer take the trip. It's kind of just giving you peace of mind that you're not like contractually and monetarily locked into something and you cannot get out. So we love a no strings attached agreement. As far as Airbnb, it's typically the place that I go to when I want to stay in a place that feels more like the city that I'm traveling to. For example, if I'm going to Spain, then I probably don't want to stay in a hotel. I'll want to stay somewhere where I can feel like the culture of the environment and just feel like I'm at someone's home. And then also with Airbnb, sometimes if you're booking like a room inside of someone's home, the host or someone that they're having manage the property will be there, and they can often give you like cool spots to visit or just local things to do. So they're basically your free local tour guide. Obviously, do what you want with that information. I know that not everybody is going to want a host on site, because then it feels like you don't have your own space. But I will say, when my best friend Rebecca and I have traveled and stayed in a room in someone's home, we typically had pretty good experiences, because the host usually would just stay in their own space, or they'd be working all day like out of the home, or they would just be there kind of when it's convenient, like maybe at breakfast or something, and they're just chatting with us about like, hey, you know, this is happening today, maybe you want to check it out, or blah blah blah, just like useful stuff. But it was always like quick, and we didn't feel like our space was being treaded on at all, and it did not feel intrusive at all. I very much appreciated that. And lastly, the Safara app. In terms of pricing, Safara is definitely more on like the industry standard. However, they do have the highest percentage of cash back of a whopping 10%. So every time that you book with them, you're basically just giving yourself a free discount for the future, because you get to apply those credits to your future bookings. And then with the Safara app, I do actually have a $100 off code for you guys, which I'll put on the screen up here here and then also linked down below. Sephora also by far has the best quality listings. Like, their photos are always inviting, clean, and more accurate than I've seen on other booking platforms, which I would love if other booking platforms would put more effort into their photos, because sometimes you'll have like 2 photos of an area and then you're left wondering, what does this place actually look like? And Sephora is not like that. You're not left guessing what the space actually looks like and how big the space actually feels. And then what I also love about Sephora is that they bring in reviews from other booking platforms like Expedia, Booking.com, Hotels.com, and others, so that you're getting a pretty wide range of reviews, not just from one specific website either. Moving on to budgeting before your trip. So once you have the major things out of the way, like the price of your stay and the price of your flight, we're gonna need to start budgeting for things during your trip. And those can include things like transportation costs, excursions, shopping, and food costs, most importantly. If you are going to a city that has really good public transportation, then I highly recommend taking advantage of that, because typically transportation costs are just gonna add up and add up and add up, even if you are able to take cheaper ones. So usually like a train ride, typically only around $1.50 to $2 or euros or pounds or whatever. It's usually in that range. So that is extremely affordable in comparison to taking Ubers everywhere you go. And then of course, walking is always a great option if it's feasible for you. As far as food planning goes, if you're staying in a hotel that does have a kitchen or you're staying in an Airbnb, then I highly recommend going grocery shopping. Literally, when you touch down from that plane, go to the grocery store and get yourself some food for the week. Once you're out and about, like in your trip, and you're just like in the mood to just be out and oh my gosh, so fun. Usually we just start like throwing our money to the wind on food and shopping and whatnot. But if we have already set ourselves up for success and we've already grocery shopped, then we're not gonna feel as inclined to eat out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. When I go on trips where I plan to get groceries, I typically double down on the breakfast foods, because I know that that's gonna be the time when I'm probably the hungriest and I'm not trying to leave the house. I just wanna be able to go into the kitchen, make myself some food in 5 minutes and eat it, and then go about my day, start getting ready so that I can go out and have fun. I do feel like realistically dinner is probably the hardest in my opinion to like get groceries for, because for one, dinners are way more well-rounded than the other meals. Usually we have heftier dinners, and usually you're already out at night doing things, so you're not trying to come back home to make an entire dinner, which also takes the longest. Maybe give yourself some grace on the dinner meals, perhaps lunch too. But if we can cut down on at least 1 or hopefully 2 of those meals in our trip, then we're gonna save a ton of money. And then when it comes to your excursions, I definitely think that it's best to pre-plan all of those so that you have an exact amount to go off of. It could just be as easy as writing down all those excursions in your notes app and then jotting down the price of that excursion right next to it. And from what I've noticed, when traveling, I feel like the excursions are always the things that we don't really give much attention to, and those are the things that kind of make the trip the most fun. So if we don't have any money in our budget to do those fun excursions, we might end up feeling like we didn't experience our trip to the fullest. So then, just to be safe with your like extraneous money, maybe you can even tack on an extra $50 to $100 in your budget so that you're planning for maybe a spontaneous excursion, or it can just be leftover money for emergencies. And then if you don't spend it, then you got some extra money to go back home with. Thank you. So my best friend Rebecca and I are going back to Europe in September, and previously for budgeting, I would just get my travel credit cards down to a super low budget and then basically spend my credit card on everything during that trip so that I could rack up those travel points. And then of course, definitely need to be responsible when we're doing that, paying everything off immediately. And those points that I racked up previously definitely came in handy in multiple situations. But this time I did decide to go another route and started utilizing a separate savings account, which is one that I literally never see unless I actually log into that account. And with this savings account, account, I kind of just like stash money every time I get paid into it, and then I won't know exactly how much is in there until I do log in and like check on, oh hey, like how's my budget going, blah blah blah. Okay, great, leave it alone. But this way I'm not ever tempted to spend that money, because out of sight, out of mind, and that money quite literally does not exist until I go on my trip in September. Now, you may be wondering, how do I even find things to do in this city that I'm traveling to? Welcome to the internet. And as obvious as that sounds, it truly is the best way to quickly find things to do in any city that you're visiting. There is literally always a cool travel or lifestyle blogger talking about cool things to do in every single city ever. And the route that I personally take when finding things to do in a new city is, you guessed it, planning ahead of time. So my best friend Rebecca and I are both notorious Google Maps users, and both of our social feeds on TikTok and Instagram are always feeding us travel content. We kind of just trained our feeds to work for us in that way, so that whenever we travel, we already have the upper hand. Also, if you didn't guess this already, my best friend Rebecca and I are basically travel partners, so that's why I keep mentioning her in my travels. So the way that we use our feeds to work for us is basically whenever we see something cool, we just go straight over to Google Maps and we save it on our Google Maps. And we also do have one of those shared saved albums on Instagram. So again, whenever we see something cool, we're just like, okay, perfect, save. But now this album is working double time for us, because we don't have to put any extra thought or energy into finding cool things to do later along the line. And I do think that this tip is still helpful if you're not someone who plans ahead of time, because you can easily just take a day, a couple hours out of your day, look up all these videos like cool things to do in whatever city, and then just start saving all of those to your Google Maps or even just a folder. I do want to mention though, you will definitely get an overwhelming amount of information and cool places to go and experience. Maybe you can put like a time limit on your search or something so that you're not getting overwhelmed. And then last but certainly not least, it's time to get to the fun stuff, itinerary planning. And to make this just as simple and as easy as I possibly can, I'm literally just going to walk you through the itinerary that I created with Rebecca, of course, for our Europe trip last year. And the places that we visited were Milan, Lake Como, Venice, and Paris, all within a week and a half. So we definitely had to have a pretty detailed itinerary if we wanted to see all of the things that we wanted to see and also maintain our sanity. So for reference, we were in Europe from September 13th to the 23rd. I wrote down exactly when both of us would be departing our flights from Phoenix and New York, and I was flying in straight from New York Fashion Week, so that's why our flight locations are a little bit different, which I did not love not being on the same flight, because then like you're not landing in the city with your best friend. But it's no big deal, it's just like cuter and more fun if you're on the same flight, you know what I'm saying? So September 14th, a Thursday, we have exactly when both of our flights landed in Milan, and then we also have the terminals written down. In this case, we were in the same terminal, but once again, if you guys are not on the same flights or even the same like airlines, then there's a pretty good chance that you won't be landing in the same terminal, and that's kind of stressful, especially if you're in a country where you don't speak the language and all of the signs are in a different language, because then you're navigating a busy, stressful airport all by yourself. And in those situations, definitely two heads are better than one, and just being with a friend kind of eliminates all of that stress and you're just thinking it out together. And then I just kind of wrote down a couple little things that we decided that we wanted to do, which we actually did not end up being able to do because the travel time, I under budgeted so absurdly for the travel time. I don't know what really happened there, but needless to say, we only got to spend a couple hours in Milan before we had to go check into our Airbnb. And our train to Lake Como, because we flew into Milan, but we were really there to go to Lake Como. Obviously no worries, and we still made it to our train, which was the most important part because we had to get on on the last train to Lake Como. And we certainly were not about to miss our train to our Airbnb. And then if you'll notice here, I wrote down the address of our Airbnb so that if there's ever like a time where one of us needs navigate to our Airbnb from wherever, then we have it just right in this notes app ready to grab at any given moment. And then once again, if there's like excursions that have specific times on them, then I'll just put them in the itinerary so that we know what time we need to be ready by, we need to know what time we need to leave by, things like that to make everything stress-free. And then it may seem absurd that I did schedule in chillaxing on September 16th, a Saturday. Rebecca and I are both people who will just like do back-to-back events if we're visiting a new city, because obviously we want to maximize what we're getting out of this trip because we spend money to fly across the world. We want to see as much as we possibly can. If you do that for like an entire week and a half or 2 weeks, you're probably gonna go insane. So it's best to just schedule ahead of time when you're gonna have those rest breaks and just being moments, because at the end of the day we are human and we need time to just do nothing and sleep in if we want to. And then it's definitely important when you do have an itinerary, kind of just like keeping a very open mind about the schedule, because nothing is ever going to go exactly according to plan, especially when you're traveling in a foreign country, because you just literally don't know. And that's just it. Like there's way too many what ifs to try to be exact for your entire itinerary, and then that just adds 100 times more stress if you're trying to be exact for every single thing in your itinerary. And then I suppose just as a disclaimer, because whenever I like show someone my itinerary, they're always like, oh my gosh, you're an insane person. I know that a very planned out itinerary may seem stressful in some ways, especially if you're someone who just generally likes to go with the flow, especially when traveling. But this is really just works best for me and typically the people that I'm traveling with, who also know me and know how structured and planned that I am, so they don't really mind, and oftentimes they find it helpful as well. And once again, I'm just trying to maximize the output that I'm getting from my trip, because my money and my time are both very valuable to me, so I want to make sure that I'm making the most out of my trip. And then lastly, I kind of just want to give a couple pointers for when you are traveling, just so that your trip goes as smoothly as possible. So first, when you are traveling abroad, I definitely recommend looking up information on major cultural differences. For instance, when you're traveling to Eastern countries, it's definitely going to be safe to like have a general understanding, different views on like modesty, family values, and probably major religious aspects that you'll just want to know about when you're in that country. Although if you are a bit of an overthinker, probably don't do way too much research, because you'll probably end up more stressed out than you were in the first place, or you might even just receive false information. So I definitely just suggest getting like a broad view and then going with a grain of salt on it. We want to experience the world for ourselves and not be tied down to other people's experiences. For example, when my best friend Rebecca and I went to Paris last year in September, we got fed so many TikToks and reels about Paris, just talking about like how rude French people are and how much they hate Americans and like how dirty the city was and how bad it smelled and just stuff like that. And then once we got there and experienced it for ourselves, our experience was not like that at all. And I certainly cannot claim that it's because we look European or something, or that we're fluent in French or whatever the people try to say when someone is not mean to you in France. However, I will say that it was extremely useful that I speak like moderate French, because there were plenty of places that we went to in Paris where people there spoke only French to us, which obviously because they're in Paris, but like I guess we weren't expecting that. I don't know. So shout out to Duolingo and also ASU for teaching me French. And then secondly and finally, just make sure to be safe. Like there is plenty of information out there on common mishaps or common like certain crimes in certain cities. So if you know about them already going into the city, then you're just gonna know what to look out for and how to protect yourself and the others that you're gonna be with during your trip. Those are all the tips that I have for you you guys in today's video, and I definitely hope that you remember these when you're planning for your next trip, or maybe you can even save this video and come back to it later or share it with a friend, because in today's economy we could all use an affordable trip. But I would love for you to come back for future videos, especially my travel vlogs. And just a little spoiler, I will be in Dallas next week as well as New York the week after, and then once again my best friend Rebecca and I are going back to Europe in September. And yes, I did use all of these tips to plan our European vacation, and our total cost is under $1,500 a person, so follow me for more tips. And we're staying for 2 weeks. And then make sure that you follow along on my TikTok, where I'm currently doing a 30-day series called 30 Days of Travel Tips with your broke travel bestie, as well as my Instagram, where I post the really cute and aesthetically pleasing photos and videos. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next week. Bye!